Hello, everyone. Welcome back to stream 3. Before I start introducing the next speaker, we're obviously facing some problems here on WebEx, but if you still have the problems, go to our website and click on the YouTube link. In YouTube, everything is working fine. But having said that, I'm very, very happy to introduce our next speaker. This is Joel Curado. Joel is Digital Transformation Leader at Cisco Switzerland. And Joel will run a workshop today with the title Smart City, Barcelona and Chicago. Joel, I'm very glad you are with us. The floor is yours.
Petra, thank you so much for having me here today. It is a pleasure and an honor to be here at the Davos Digital Forum, and I truly hope that you enjoy the presentation. Today, the presentation will be about how we create partnerships for impact. How can we focus in creating such partnerships? But before we get to those partnerships, we need to understand what are the current problems, what are the current issues. Then we need to focus about topics like technology, how governance plays a role in understanding how the different entities, the different agencies of the government intertwine and interconnect. And last but not least, why it is important to have a human-centric approach to this setup. I will finalize then with a few examples of cities around the world that have done setups like this, and then I'll be opening the floor for any questions. So, as many of you know, nowadays, we are facing a rapid urbanization when it comes to aggregation of citizens around major cities in the world. It is expected that until 2050, we will have 2/3 of the population aggregated in these cities. That will create, indeed, many different challenges, from shifting economics from a regional perspective to a major city perspective, from the social demographics. You'll have melting pots in cities. You will have elderly people increasing across time. You will also continue to see, unfortunately, environmental challenges with climate change and how they impact people who move around, migrate. And last but not least, how these cities, these mega cities, will continue to receive citizens from all around the world, but with the same type of infrastructure. How can they increase their infrastructure, maintain it, and manage the resources that they have today? There was a study that was done last year about what are the major challenges that we see in cities around the world. And the major city economic challenges that we see are all about their concerns. How do I attract the best brains, the best companies? How can I provide components like a safe and secure environment, housing, education, healthcare, something that attracts the city and provides a high level of livability. But also at the same time, when you think about the creation of these new services, how do we actually continue to manage the budget that now is more constrained? Their OPEX, their CAPEX really continues to go down, but there is that need, that pressure to create these services. If we think about technology at the same time, for any city official, for any city, they are being bombarded, let's put it this way, with new applications. But the problem is always there. How can I create more efficiency? How can I create a cost-saving approach? And at the same time, improve the citizen engagement, have a more closer engagement between the citizen, the city official. And at the end of the day, how can I create services that attract data that I can leverage to improve the experience, to improve what we would call urban sustainable development across the city for the next generations to come? And also, how can I drive metrics to make sure that indeed we have a successful implementation of these new services? And this all starts with public policy challenges at the end of the day. And how can I solve these challenges, and how can I implement and define and measure such challenges across the board? If we think about the different technologies then on top, then there is a panoplia of different technologies that we can leverage in order to deliver such examples. And I'm talking about situations like we're using wireless technology, LoRaWAN, or the emergency of 5G and narrowband IoT, in which we will connect and have real-time data retrieved from sensors, or even nowadays, as we see vehicle companies like Tesla that are using already DSRC, vehicle-to-vehicle, vehicle-to-infrastructure from a mobility standpoint. How can we deliver and enable these services? Many cities are already leveraging distributed ledgers and blockchain technology in their own databases, in their own services, which is very interesting. And also, how can we reduce OPEX, improve the efficiency to achieve true business outcomes when we think about certain enablements like private, public, or even hybrid clouds? And how can the city officials create these new services for the citizens in that way? Always bearing in mind that on top of everything, the citizen is at the center, and that regulation, data privacy, and protection of the citizen must always be at the top of it. Of course, if you think about cities nowadays, we have a lot of siloed services, many different departments, many different networks. And from a business outcome, from an efficiency standpoint, it's not optimal. You have to think about a quality perspective. How do we focus on security, risks, and costs? And how can we merge everything together? And that will be very important in order to achieve what we would call a proper ROI, return on investment. And in that case, we need to break down the silos. We need to focus on what we would call innovation silos or service silos. We need to focus on understanding the costs and the risks. City officials usually will have to do what we call like a gap analysis, focusing on where they are today, where they want to go, and build that roadmap, understand their vision, their strategy, and their execution, and how can they go forward from point A to point B, and then centralize that. If I think about the aggregation of these networks, what really truly makes sense, and this is an agnostic approach, is a multi-service network that actually improves the efficiency of the management of the different networks and of the different silos, breaking down the silos, having a dedicated team that aggregates everything. City of Barcelona did that, and I will share with you a bit more what happened there. But if we do this, we can actually deliver a simplified management and more secure environment, because at the end of the day, if you have all networks centralized, if you have everything under the same team, then from a security standpoint, you can achieve many more things. And this part is the technology part. At the end of the day, what we aim to achieve here, actually then, from a government perspective, is a strategic framework. And this strategic framework here, we need to work together with the different stakeholders in the city in order to identify the problems and then identify the business outcomes. If we think about all of these components, it is important to identify what is the problem that they aim to address, what is the citizen relevancy that they aim to achieve. As I said, having the city in mind, the maturity of the city in terms of technology adoption, the focus of the citizen within their needs and what they can get and what we can deliver as part of insights. Also, then we need to think clearly about the ecosystem, and that's very important because the ecosystem will help us define that sustainable approach. Management and support is crucial for long-term deployment and management of the service. How can we set up the stakeholder responsibilities, the execution, and the support of these services? And finally, last but not least, when we have all the players on top of the table, then we can focus on what is the right technology. Is it physical? Is it virtual? And then create that type of citizen service. But what is also important to bear in mind is that these types of services need to have a human-centric approach. And for us, what is important is that we have the internet at the core of the foundation of what we call these creations of new services. The internet today is known as the fourth infrastructure. We need to understand how the different elements come together, water, lighting, electricity, gas, and how the internet can help enable that. On top of that, when I think about a citizen in a city, we need to understand from a safety and security perspective, what type of services can we have that will enable the citizen to feel safe, like having smart lighting, for instance, or having blue light organizations. Of course, it is important to the citizen to have healthcare and to have the right setup in place so that they can also understand that they can go and feel safe and taken care of. All of that with a heavy focus on what we would call regulation. And in that regulation point, from a society standpoint, it is important to make sure that the laws are made and the legislation is made to cover for the citizen, having the citizen in mind. I would like to take 5 minutes right now to go a bit through the different examples that I bring here today. First one is Barcelona. They had some challenges with their network. They had the silos, as I mentioned before in the presentation. They aggregated everything. But on top of that, they saw value. They started to develop new tourism services, providing Wi-Fi to citizens. And then on top, they said, wow, wait a second, maybe I can do something even better. And they created a platform called Centillo, which basically aggregated real-time data from sensors around the city through the network so that in real time, citizens and city officials could capture data from parking, from traffic, from many different other elements like quality of air. The network is important, but also the leverage of other technologies. And that is the foundation for the enablement of other projects that they have. One of them that I actually very fond of is Decidim, which is an open source participatory democracy platform to which city officials aim to approach citizens and their officials with regards to the types of projects that are important for the cities, for them to help continue develop their city, prioritizing the projects, having the opinion of the citizens. Very important and very interesting approach. In Chicago, in Illinois, their focus was on how can we create the standard governance model and how can we create agencies that can help connect the dots within the different organizations. And for that, Chicago created, well, the state of Illinois created the Department of Innovation and Technology in order to have a test bed of new technologies, to test new technologies, to connect the dots from a cross-functional perspective within the different departments of the city, and also focusing on the creation of these new services. They leverage technologies like WebEx, like we're using today, to connect with the different entities within the organization, but also they went further. And they created a very interesting platform called Chicago Data Portal, which is an open source portal in which they added all the information that they could from the city, from bus stops to the salaries of every employee in the city, and gave it away for free so that startups and accelerators could leverage that data to build new services on top. So very interesting way to accelerate innovation in a city. Last but not least, let's talk about our own corner of the world, Switzerland, in which we, as part of the Country Digital Acceleration team, started by activating the ecosystem, starting to understand who are the players, understand what are the needs of the cities today, and how they are being more or less mature. And with that, we started to create and partner with different entities. We were part of a Verein called Minigemein, together with Swisscom, with Post, Zurich Insurance, and many others. Same thing, partnering with Davos Digital Forum in activating regional economic development. And we started to understand what are the problems of the regions, of the cities. And with that, start to create what we would call joint value propositions. We went to the villages, we did workshops. And with that, what our expectation is to create these solutions that can enable a more inclusive future. Another partnership that I would like to mention that has been very interesting is also with the Village Office, and Village Office is the largest co-working association in Switzerland. We are a technology partner for them, and our objective is, again, to activate that regional economic development so that we can bring people the quality of life in these regional and more remote areas that they deserve and that they aim to achieve. With that, I would like to finish my presentation, but as a call to action, I would like to invite you all to come and talk to us, email us, connect with us. It will be a pleasure to understand what you're doing in the smart city space. It would be very interesting to see how we could work together to create these joint value propositions and accelerate digitization in Switzerland. Thank you very much. And I would open now the floor for Q&A.
Yes, hey, Joel, what an interesting presentation. And you know, we really see how you love your job. Really super, super interesting, Joel. What I think is you were mentioning, you know, cities are bombarded with apps and with solutions, etc., etc. And on the other hand, you were also saying breaking down the silos. So my question is, you know, how is Cisco helping to drive smart city strategies in cities around the world? With which tool? How exactly you're doing it? And how do you overcome these hurdles?
Thank you so much, Petra. I think our focus is to talk, cities look at us as thought leaders in the smart city space. We've been in this place for, I would say, over a decade right now. And when cities come to us, they come to us with problems, with issues. Cisco as a company cannot solve everything for a city because they will have multiple challenges. What Cisco brings into the table is the fact that we can bring multiple use cases and multiple success stories of projects from all around the world that we try to be replicable, that we try to make forth together, and the fact that we can connect with the local ecosystem and create that end-to-end approach that the cities need. And that is the important part. How can we bring all the players into the same table that will bring the different elements of what we need to solve the problem so that cities can have that business outcome that they need and break those silos, as you mentioned.
Yeah, sure. There's another question, and that's a question comes in basically all the live streams I've been moderating today. And the question is like, okay, there are different levels of maturity. There are cities, big cities, like you were mentioned, Barcelona and Chicago, they do have a super level, but we also have here, especially in Switzerland, the size of cities is, for example, in China, considered to be a village. So the question here is like how city maturity affects the adoption of technology and new citizen services. So do they have to be very smart to get it, or how do you work on that, and especially in Switzerland?
Great question. I would say that, and I've seen this, for instance, in Lisbon. I saw this in Madrid as well, and in other cities around Europe. There's a couple ways to address this. There's a technological way to address this. There's a people-centric, human-centric approach to it. I've seen very social setups, like creating co-working spaces, creating innovation accelerators, so that they could develop new services, new initiatives. We need to understand that I don't believe that I think even if you have a low maturity, you can have what we would call a technological jump from an evolution perspective, which actually would help the village or the city. I think we need to understand what are the problems, what is the budget, and even with the budget, I mean, what can these players that we bring from an ecosystem standpoint can bring to the table to work together to make something as a showcase, as an example. And also bearing in mind that the maturity has also to do with the citizens. Demographics plays a very important role here. People with disability play a very important role here. How can I create a service that is inclusive for everyone? How can I create something that everyone can access in a clear way? And I think that's the important part. Focus on the citizen, focus on the problems, and then go from that point and expand.
Joel, I have one last question. And this, I think, is very interesting. How do the last month's experience, smart city with pandemic lockdown and post-lockdown, impact the actual systems?
Amazing question. They do say
1 minute.
1 minute. They do say that the biggest accelerator for digital transformation was COVID. COVID accelerated what we would call all these initiatives, from teleworking, from the policies, from the engagement with people. We started to look into healthcare plans on resiliency. And I think the focus here is there was a shift on how can we leverage technology to create more resilient cities. And I think that's the message here. How can we create long-term sustainability, business continuity from the government, from the companies, because people cannot stop working. That would crash the economy. So I think there was a huge effort now from the cities from a resilience perspective and from a business continuity perspective to make sure that everyone can continue to work in a safe environment, in an environment that they will say, okay, I have the right technology, and technology is actually helping me to achieve what I need to do from a work perspective, from a quality of life perspective.
Yeah. Joel, thank you so much for answering this question. So in a way, the COVID-19 was also kind of a driver for your solutions and for your company, to sum it up. For all the others, we have time for a break, for a coffee break of 15 minutes. And then at 10:45, do me the favor, join us to listen to a keynote from Annette Numa from Estonia. And she will really talk about hot stuff, new solutions from Estonia. Again, Joel, thank you so much. And for all the others, join us again at 10:45. Thank you very much, Joel.
Thank you so much, Petra. Have a good day.